trying to contain myself a little bit because I'm noticing I'm actually super excited about sharing with you today, and this surprises me a little bit because videos are normally a big edge for me, but I have this really deep knowing and awareness that it's really time for me to show up here because I have so much to share, and I feel like what I share is something of value to you. And by the way, I'm Jasmine Rose, if we haven't met, and I am the creatress of Shakti Yoga, which is womb-centered yoga, specific for the female body, which is a ritual practice of embodying the sacred feminine, or Shakti, and Shakti being this Sanskrit word that speaks to the dynamic force in all of creation, the feminine principle. And the feminine principle, which is, you could say, more readily available being in a female body. And I want to share a little bit more about that in more detail in this series of videos to speak to what is the path of Shakti, what is this feminine path of awakening and embodiment, at least from my perspective. And I'd really love to elucidate that by sharing some of my own stories from my journey and from all the women that I've worked with over the years. I've been doing this work for probably 10 years if you include the time that I was doing it without knowing that's what I was doing. And it all just really landed and became this body of work called Shakti Yoga 4 years ago, which I not only have the pleasure of teaching and sharing with women, but also initiating women into teaching in their own way with their communities. So I want to start by sharing about what is this path of Shakti, what makes it unique and different from the more traditional paths of yoga or spirituality. And I have a story that I feel like will demonstrate that really clearly. And I always feel so honored when women share their stories with me. And what I always notice is that there are these common threads, and that the personal experiences that women have really speak to this collective experience of the feminine. And this particular story really struck me because it kind of highlighted and reminded me in a very powerful way of why I do the work that I do and why I'm so passionate about it. It really fueled my fire. So as well as sharing these Shakti Yoga practices and trainings, I do womb healing work. And I had a client who shared with me when I first met her this story where she had attended a Vipassana retreat, and I'm sure many of you know what that is, and perhaps you've done it yourself, but this is a really, let's just say, a very disciplined form of meditation with quite strict, austere conditions when you go to this 10-day silent retreat, with a very specific technique. And I actually haven't done one myself, so I've done similar things. But anyhow, this woman had a very unexpected, what we could classify as a Kundalini awakening. Kundalini being this potent spiritual energy that lives inside the body. And her experience of this awakening was very strong, it was very powerful, it was very, very intense. She had no idea this was coming. It was completely unexpected. And there was just no way that she could control her experience of this because it was so physical and emotional and spiritual and, everything all at once. And so, the expectation on this retreat is that you're, sitting silently in meditation. And she had this kind of eruption of emotion, of energy, and what she told me was incredibly orgasmic. And there was just no way that she could suppress that, right? And now the bit that I guess saddened me, which was that the people working on the retreat were very you could say, dismissive of her experience, and were very ill-equipped in supporting her through it. This woman was told by these teachers or facilitators in a very shaming way, right? Oh, that's passion. Go back to your breath. And basically was told that that experience was not okay. And she should just get back to the practice, right? And what this experience that she has speaks to in the much bigger picture is the suppression of the feminine. You know, the feminine being power, being energy, being emotion, being eros, being everything that a lot of these more classical traditions, I dare say, dismiss or deny, right? Or it's like that too much story, the feminine being too much. And so therefore we'll just push her down and, you know, push her away and, you know, do everything we can so that we don't have to deal with this force that she is. And, you know, I say that with laughter, but I can only laugh because of what I now know so deeply, which is that this is the very force that is actually the fuel for our spiritual practice, actually, it can be. That is, when integrated and when welcomed and celebrated, is the very force, of course, of creation that births all things. That is Shakti, this primordial force of creation. And the medicine that we need, because what's happened through this suppression, through this denial, through this shaming of the feminine is that we have been cut off from a very essential part of ourselves. And therefore we are disconnected from our essential selves as women. We are disconnected from our sisters, from other women. We're disconnected from the earth herself, from nature. And my experience in my spiritual journey has been the same. And I've had experiences not to the extent of that intensity that sister shared with me, but I have been very deeply involved in yoga schools and paths that were very intent on transcending this force of passion of Shakti. And I kind of laugh because I think about when I was, let's just say I was blinded to all of this, because that is the nature of, let's call it patriarchy. This doesn't just play out in yoga, in spiritual traditions. It plays out on a much larger scale than that. And so the veils and what prevents us from seeing and knowing that, they're so thick, but they're not so thick anymore, right? We're women everywhere and men and, you know, all gendered beings are waking up to this truth, right? So back then I would I would chant always at the end of my yoga classes, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, a blessing of peace, and a beautiful one at that. And I don't want to discount any of these traditions or paths, by the way. They have their place, they have their value, but they've been very distorted. And I kind of look back on myself then, because all of the groups that I was a part of back then, there was absolutely no teaching around what do you actually do with this force of passion, with our feeling. And I have a lot to say on that I will speak to in the next video, about the way that our feeling, our passion, our innate connection with the earth, with nature as women is actually a path in and of itself. So I would love to hear anything that has sparked you from this sharing today, and I look forward to tuning in tomorrow with the next installment.